the global scenario in the context of the growing Ukraine crisis, how to understand the international relations and the moves of the major players in the world affairs and the causalities which are there behind the different steps taken by the major players and also the minor players in the world affairs. Today, on the 10th March 2022, we find that Ukraine's condition is day by day going ruinous. The cities which were once flourishing and the citizenry were happy there, they are now compelled to migrate in lakhs. Almost 500,000, or almost, I should say, 5 million people or 4 million people from different cities of Ukraine. They have migrated to the neighboring states like Poland. And this is a very heartbreaking situation to have an empathy with this forcibly migrating people, how they felt pain where they have been living for centuries from the time of their ancestors, how they were compelled to leave their homes. So this is the scenario we have in the 20th century, such scenarios occurring in different countries, particularly in the context of the First World War and Second World War. We may see such migrations at a very large scale and human casualties. Now, what is the anatomy? What is the dynamics of the international relations? What are the major players? And what is that which is conflictual among them, which causes the occurrence of such bad events, like the migration of the people from their homes in a scenario where their homes were being bombarded? To understand this, one will have to have the understanding of the major players of the international relations. The major players after 1945, after the end of the Second World War, were the permanent members of the Security Council, who were the winners of the Second World War, and they were USA, UK, France, and Russia, or USSR till 1991. And of course, after 1973, People's Republic of China. So these are the major 5 players having a dominant role in the international affairs, and they have been given the veto power. Now, these are the things which one can understand and everyone would be knowing that how there are these five powers. But what is the relationship? And the relationship can be just described in terms of growing competition among the multinational companies of these major players. The capitalism which has entered into a phase which is unprecedented in the context of the end of Soviet Union. This capitalism has become something like a panacea, something like a solution for all the problems of development. And every country adopted capitalism in different forms or in different extents, limiting the role of state. And gradually, the multinational companies and the capitalist classes growing in these big player countries. And these big player countries, the permanent members of Security Council, they are engaged in a cutthroat competition to excel and to establish their hegemony over the rest of the world. And hegemony in the form of the multinational companies of the big powers, how to have the multinational companies a control over different parts of the world. This is something like a fact which one should keep in mind to understand the conflicts. As it should be known, it should be understood that how after 1991, Russian Federation came along with 14 republics, which were earlier the part of Soviet Union. And comparatively from 1991, Russian Federation economically emerged as a powerful nation-state system. And because of that emergence, the Russian Federation developed the ideology and worldview and a policy that they have something like a sphere of influence in the former Soviet Union republics, because they have been part of the Soviet Union, and Russian Federation being the greatest part, the major part of Soviet Union, former Soviet Union, and also a powerful capitalist country after the 1991 developments, developed something like a policy and understanding, a worldview that the former Soviet Union republics are something like having under the sphere of influence of Russian Federation. This very concept of sphere of influence is very much important to understand, because this sphere of influence concept can have a parallel in the policy of the United States. In the beginning of the 19th century, when in 1823, the President of United States at that time evolved or dictated or declared a policy called Monroe Doctrine, where something similar to sphere of influence doctrine was declared, that no European country would be having any say, any commanding say in the American continent, North and South American continent. It was naturally agreed or declared, and Europe agreed to it, that in America, the America will have the sphere of influence. Likewise, in Second World War, the end of the Second World War, the sphere of influence concept emerged, in which the Eastern Europe was declared as something like a place of sphere of influence of Soviet Union or Stalin, who was the chief of the Communist Party. And the Western Europe indirectly was taken as something like a place of the sphere of influence of the Western powers, particularly Britain, France, and United States of America. And in the rest of the world, these two powers, for the sake of clarity, for the sake of explaining, one may say the Soviet bloc and the USA or the NATO bloc, they developed something like a competition among themselves to establish their hegemony in the rest of the world. And that the whole history witnessed in the form of the growing Cold War and the theater of war in different parts of the world in the form of proxy wars. Means the local, in any country, local competing interests were fighting. And if suppose there was, or there have been two parties, one was supported by Soviet Union, the other was supported by USA. So this something like the whole world became something like an arena for the competition of Soviet Union and USA. And with the end of the Cold War, particularly after 1991, we find that the balance of the international forces, that was very much disturbed. And anyhow, it was tilted in favor of NATO countries. But gradually, Russian Federation, which became very powerful in the republics of the former Soviet Union, having the nuclear power and having all the resources economic and having all the potential to dominate, that emergence of Russian Federation led to certain situation where Russian Federation developed something like a natural claim that the areas which were formerly the areas of Soviet Union, they would have something like a sphere of influence of Russian Federation. So this thing one should understand. And now one should also understand how particularly USA understood certain things as far as the Cold War is concerned. And as far as the Afghan experience, the Taliban experience is concerned, that USA is not going to send their troops to any warring location because of the national opposition USA had in the context of Vietnam, in the context of recently what happened in Taliban's area of Afghanistan. But the proxy war, or the war which USA had to wage to keep the interests of the multinationals intact, that war they are always ready with their allies to wage in the form of supplying arms and ammunition to those countries which are naturally to be influenced by the NATO countries or the NATO influence. And Ukraine being such a country which was very much under the influence of Russian Federation, anyhow a situation developed after 1991 that all the republics which were there of Soviet Union, they anyhow started tilting towards becoming the member of European community and also becoming the member of NATO. And Ukraine, although applied for being the member of NATO, but was denied that membership or was not confirmed that. But this very move of Ukraine trying to join NATO camp, that very much bewildered or provoked Soviet Union to establish the sphere of influence in Ukraine. The economic interest of Soviet Union was very much in jeopardy as far as the perception of Russian Federation is concerned. Jeopardy in the sense that the more multinational companies of USA and the allies, they would enter into Ukraine, that would be something like diminishing or countering the influence of the powerful multinational companies of Russia. So this is something like a scenario which is to be understood in the context of the growing conflict among the NATO and particularly Russian Federation. And in this context, one should understand the role of particularly India and China. How India and China played something like a crucial role to counter the situation. How China had certain interests and how India had a particular interest. India had something like an interest in Kashmir, Kashmir being the integral part of India, and the role of Pakistan, sometimes in collaboration with USA, trying to disturb India, and also the same scenario one can understand in the context of China. How China had Formosa, which was a former territory of China, was forcibly occupied by USA from 1949 when China became People's Republic of China and Chiang Kai-shek's forces came to occupy Formosa. So particularly these things are the subsidiary things, but because of China being the member of the Security Council, its role should also be analyzed, and India being one of the largest economies of the world, as far as GDP is concerned, it's ranking third after USA, China, and also having military power very superior to all the top powers of the world, not superior, not less than, I should say, the top powers of the world. So the role of India, China, India being something like a 2 years members of the Security Council and the role India played, and also in this context one should understand about United Arab Emirates' role, and gradually more and more states in the General Assembly of the United States, they are siding with the posture and the position taken by the Russian Federation. And now there was something like a move in USA by Joe Biden to say certain things or to have a posture against India. But even in USA, recently, about 24 hours to 48 hours back, in USA, some of the senators, some of the member of parliament, they opposed Joe Biden by saying that it would be foolish to take any stand against India. So with these words, I think in a very nutshell, in a very brief, one can understand the current global scenario and the dynamics of the forces which are there, defining the events which are taking place. And in this context, one should understand the potential of the world growing to the verge of Third World War, which is also to be understood that Third World War would not take place because of the Russian domination of the Ukraine, and Ukraine is going to be cowed down by Russian Federation. And then again, something like a balance of force would emerge, and it would be something like a fait accompli accepted by USA and the allies that yes, of course, this area is the sphere of influence of Russian Federation. So thank you.